Hello students, welcome back to the video series for Business Analytics for Marketing. This video will cover the topic of positioning and how we do it using multidimensional scaling or perceptual mapping. Now, as part of multidimensional scaling, it basically helps us position our uh, products or brands that we are considering better. The top of mind question for positioning is, how do consumers perceive brands in a market? How can a product differentiate itself on key perceptual dimensions? So, having this as our focus, we will look into the same example that we looked at in the class. We will use the same data set that we used, which was basically taking into account the survey that you have filled for different mobile brands. As you remember, we compared between Samsung and MI, Samsung and Apple, Samsung and Oppo, Samsung and Realme, Samsung and OnePlus, etc. etc. So these were the five brands or six brands that we took into consideration. One highlighting features, the other social status, the other value for money, and things like that. Now, the first thing that we need to consider is, for each of the comparisons done or provided by each of the respondents, we cannot do the analysis just using this particular data set. What we have to do is we have to take the averages or mean values for each of these columns. For the sake of time, what we have done is we have already taken them in this SPSS file, where Samsung to Samsung comparison or a product to product comparison is always 0 along the diagonal, but for every other product there is a comparison value available. For example, Samsung to Apple was 6.1298, so on and so forth. Samsung and MI 5.61, Samsung and Oppo 5.33, and similarly for other brands. So this is the data set that we will be working on. These are individual averages for individual columns of the previous data set that we saw. So how do we do multidimensional scaling? We will analyze, go to scale, click on all scale, and we have all the variables. I'll just reset it. So we have all the six different brands in the variable list here, which I'll move in this particular variable selection area. Click on model because they are all interval values. I'll click on interval. We are trying to generate a 2x2 dimension quadrant, so it's what we have put here. For options, we will click on, we will check group plots, and we see about stress. We'll come to that in a moment. What is stress and R squared? We click on continue here, and we click on OK. The moment we do that, we basically see how these values are calculated, what is stress and things like that. The most important thing here is the stress value. What is stress? Stress is a measure of the discrepancy between the observed dissimilarities or similarities and the distances in the lower dimensional space. It basically quantifies how well the multidimensional scaling model fits the data. The goal in MDS or multidimensional scaling is to minimize stress. And here, if you see, any value less than 0.2 is good. In this case, it is 0.07, which means it's good. Similarly for R squared in multidimensional scaling is similar to the concept of R squared in regression analysis, so you should keep that in mind. It basically measures the proportion of variance in the original dissimilarities that is accounted for by the distances in the lower dimensional space. Here it basically moves closer to 1, and any value above 0.7 should be considered good. In this case it's 0.98, basically suggesting that it is basically good. Now we skip this as of now, but what is basically interesting is this quadrant where we see that MI, Realme and Oppo are in this segment, whereas OnePlus is at the top of this, which basically represented feature, value for money, and more or less similar kind of a clubbing goes for Realme, Oppo, and Mi. Samsung is good to have features. It's a very common brand, and as you can see, Apple is more leaning towards social status at this side. So we need to also consider the linear graph here, as we can see that it is forming the straight line, which means the scatter plot created is actually good, and the model fits for the data that we have. So this is overall what we need to do for multidimensional scaling, where we figure out a better understanding of the brands in question and also club them. For example, in class we have done conjoint analysis, where instead of highlighting these three brands as separate, we took them as one. So it basically have a good perception for these three brands being more or less closer to each other or having similar capabilities, whereas OnePlus, Samsung, and Apple are of their own perspectives in the minds of the people who took the survey. So that's all from multidimensional scaling. If you have any queries, again, please let me know. And we meet for the next video, which is for conjoint analysis for new product development. Thank you and all the best.